Good to meet you, Janette. Good to see you again.
Hi,
So we're having a bit of a chat this morning about what we're going to cover. Janette is somebody that I met initially through CVP, wasn't it? Janette Phillips, who lives in the UK up in the Lake District. And we're going to kind of have a bit of an introduction and stuff like that. But and then I think most recently we spent some time together at the Manchester Art Fair, where we were just around the corner from each other, wasn't it? Which was cool.
Neighbours sharing.
Yes, we were. Sharing chocolate and crisps.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, and that's the days when I really needed them. So, Janette, do you want to kind of introduce yourself a little bit for the benefit of the group? I'll let you sort of say a bit about, yourself, where you live, your career as an artist.
I'll try and do it very quickly.
Take as long as it takes.
Obviously I'm Janette, and I have been painting probably now for 20 odd years. So initially I was a graphic designer.
Okay.
Worked down in London for a bit, and then went freelance because I realized I was unemployable. I hated being employed. I hated anybody being my boss and telling me where to be.
Yeah,
which I
me
think
too.
is,
It's interesting, that, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's why we veer towards being self-employed artists, because at the end of the day, we've got this sort of free spirit.
Yeah, I find it very difficult to have people tell me what to do, and I've got too many ideas and feel too squashed. Really, by the whole being an employment
I don't want to sit
thing.
here all day when I could be out doing something else.
Yeah, doing something more interesting.
So I did that, and then I had my children and did a bit more freelancing. Moved up to Yorkshire then, so we lived in Ilkley.
Oh, okay.
10 years in there, and I worked in Guiseley for Elmwood, nice big design agency. And then when I got pregnant with my third child, so by now I was mid-30s, I thought I don't want to go back to work. And also within graphics, it was quite different then, because it was a lot more computer-based and a lot more marketing-led. And again, I didn't want to be told what colour to be doing things. So and I didn't like sitting at a computer really either, because I was always a unplugged designer. I liked drawing and thinking through with pen and paper really. So I actually joined the Open College of the Arts and did their foundation in Ilkley.
Oh, okay. Brilliant.
So you just sort of do some drawing and painting, and I really liked it. It wasn't particularly very good, but I did like getting out my art materials.
Yeah.
And then we decided that we'd do another decamp, and we moved down to Pembrokeshire, and I signed up for the art foundation at the art college. So I went to Carmarthen Art College, and there was a teacher there called Peter Spriggs who was really good. And so I did the foundation, and then I went on to the degree, painting degree. And it was just really good. It's all about materials and making up your own size and priming everything and playing with all different paints. And I just started producing these big abstract landscapes, because my view, literally, down in Pembrokeshire, the coast is, and we live near Tenby, so you get the sort of big craggy rocks, and also I suppose Pembrokeshire and Wales is very linked with expressive landscape painters.
Right.
So I got in some galleries there, so I was exhibiting alongside David Tress, who is gone to be like Mr. Messens. So it was a really good art scene, and I think that's where my grounding was, basically, in that sort of wild and windy Pembrokeshire coastal art. And at that point I was asked to do some teaching at the local art education for adults, and asked to do some watercolour teaching to cover somebody who was off ill. And I'd never done any watercolour painting before, so I thought it's a bit naff, watercolours. I like my acrylics, I like working big. But anyway, I got my Shirley Trevena books out and taught myself in her sort of basically irreverent style to use watercolours, and then I got this love for fluid paint. So then there
is something, actually, isn't there, that's really fascinating about the fluidity of paint and what happens and how it behaves. And
it's
kind of
I think, in a way. I always say to my students, with watercolor you have to let the paint do what it wants to do, and it will give you stuff back, whereas acrylics you have to do it. You've got to make the acrylics do what you want. So it's that sort of call and response. It's quite a different one.
It is. It is very much so. Because I've also had some, done some watercolor paint, and it is quite compelling, actually, that wonderful
well, it's
kind of
just
spontaneity that you get in it.
And if you pay for good pigments as well,
Yes.
colour,
Yeah.
each pigment has got its own little personality. So it's getting to know those characters as well, which is really
brilliant.
Like. Whereas, so that sort of that link between my acrylics became more fluid, and I sort of between watercolor and acrylic, and I still do that now. I have periods, could be a whole year, can be a few weeks of working with one particular medium, and then I think, actually no, I want to work differently. I'm going to get the other ones out. So in my studio, I have 3 sections. I've got oils, acrylics, and watercolor into mixed media.
Ah, that's interesting.
And I pick out.
So you sort of lay out the space according to
what I'm going to do. Yeah.
Oh,
I've got
great idea.
Little trolleys with different. That's my acrylic trolley, and that's my watercolor.
Yeah.
So and I've got the space to do that now. But So then when we moved up to the Lake District, I was quite established.
Because that's where you're living now, isn't it, in the Lake District?
Yeah. So we didn't really, although I love Wales, we didn't settle. It was too far from where I come from because I'm northern. So it just felt the whole family, 6 hours to see your family was too much. So we came back about 12 years ago now. And then I sort of had to try and get myself into what do I want to do in the Lake District. It's quite, although you think it's going to be an amazing art scene, it's not. It's quite twee because most people who come here, they want
Peak District is a bit like that, actually.
Yeah, they want a nice traditional painting of a view.
Yes.
And if you don't do that for them, then it's quite difficult to know what to do.
I guess there's some similarities, isn't there, between the Lake District and the Peak District, and we've got quite a vibrant visitor economy, walkers and cyclists and people coming because it's a beautiful, beautiful countryside. And, there are quite a lot of art galleries around because there are here. And, there's also, like you're saying, a significant proportion of people who are visitors who come in want a sort of a holiday painting, a sort of memento.
Yeah, they want a picture of the favourite hill or the favourite lake. Or,
or in my case, like Monsell Head or Buxton, Spa or something like that. Yeah.
And obviously, I don't like giving people what they want.
No, neither do I.
It doesn't interest me. I could have made, an amazing career just painting views, but it doesn't do me, and it doesn't excite me really. No.
So what does excite you?
I think what paint does. At the end of the day, I love working with paint and achieving interesting things that make me want to work further with it. So it's that point at which suddenly you go, aha, now I'm interested. It's in what happens when you're working. It's not in the end. And I'm not thinking of the end result. I'm not trying to aim towards getting a pretty picture of a view, which I think would then make you work in a particular rigid way. So I am open to whatever happens, but I do like a starting point because I need something to jump from. And then I always say that if you get stuck, you can always go back to that starting point, because in there is the answer to what you wanted from your painting, even though you don't know it when you start. So it just might be it might be the light, or it might be that color against that color, or it just might be just the where the horizon line is. It can be something as simple as that, but something that would have made you want to paint that rather than anything else. So it's always going back to the starting point, but not being bound by it, I think is the thing for me.
Interesting.
So and where I am now, I can literally walk out of my house and be on the coast in 15 minutes, but it's an estuary coast. Or I can go up into the lakes and have the mountains, but I don't really do the lakes because they're too chocolate boxy. I actually get drawn more towards the Yorkshire moors, I think, just because of the big skies and the sort of more graphic flatness of it. So I very rarely go into the lakes. So I much prefer my estuary views because of the shapes of the water coming in, and the colours are just amazing.
Because I guess you must be right down by the I guess the other side of Morecambe Bay then, is that right?
So my studio, so in lockdown I got a studio, so I used to rent a studio in Kendal, and then came out just before the whole pandemic stuff happened. I had a little studio at home, but it was a bit too small for what I'm doing. So it's now my packing studio. And my dad lives in Arnside, which is about 10-minute drive from here, and it takes you along the estuary. So you're going along Morecambe Bay estuary, and there's some flats that just on their own, middle of nowhere, but they look over the estuary. They look towards Cartmel and Granger Sands.
Yeah.
And one came up for sale, so I bought that. So so my view is elevated over the estuary, so I see across the water and up to the fells.
Do you know, I'm not even seeing this, but I can feel. Oh my God, Studio MV.
I know. Well, there's a photo. I think I gave you a photo of the view.
Shall we just have a look at those?
So
just going to share a screen, see if we can find that, because that sounds absolutely incredible. So where will I find that?
It'll be towards the end.
Towards the end.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah. So that is my studio view. So that's that brown bit in the middle is actually where the sea. You can see the sort of the sea is coming in there. That's that line. So that fills up, and it can be quite wavy, choppy at times, all the way to the front. And I just literally look out, and it can change. Like I think I took some photos while I had my coffee one morning and took 4 photos, and they were very, very different. To say, look, this changes all the time.
I can imagine it must do. That's, I mean, it's a beautiful part. It's an amazing stretch of coast, this, isn't it? It's just it is really beautiful.
And that is a Whitbarrow scar that you can see lit up there. And so on the left beyond there is the Old Man of Coniston.
Okay, there.
Over there. He's lying down there. And then you see the Langdales are on the other side. And on a clear day, you can see them all very, quite clearly.
And that's the other thing about this part of the country, isn't it, as well? It's full of really beautiful, almost sort of quite romantic names, mysterious names, I always think.
And I suppose we associate it with poets and romantic writers, don't we?
So I was really fascinated by what you were saying about that kind of jumping off point, and then the process that you engage in, in the development of the work. And you've sent me some fantastic images actually of your of some of that process. Do you want to sort of talk through that a little bit more?
Go through that then. So if you go back to
tell me where to go.
So let's have a look. Well, here there's the Johnny Vegas. So if you go back to go left a bit. To keep going left, and there. So that one. So there. So you can see when I'm doing these things, this is the shapes of the water when it comes in. It snakes round and does all these strange patterns. So when I'm in sort of study mode, these shapes come out, and this was just me playing with indigo and inks. So that's that's the indigo and the Paris red ink in the background. Then in front we've got some Paris red, some watercolor. And I've got
sort of all of this here.
So that's a bit of a collage. It's 2 different studies stuck together there. And I have got into this process at the moment of painting just shapes and things that I've observed, because I can look out the window at any point and see a different shape or line, and I just tend to pick them. I'll just say, oh, I love that. And I'm painting as well. I do the same. That color, I'm going to mix that color up now and put it there. So it's just like a constant shifting inspiration, really.
So whereas it's almost like the call is coming from the external environment, isn't it? You'll spot something or see something, and it may be something as simple as, like you say, almost like a moment thing, because the landscape, I would imagine, that you're looking at is changing constantly because of the light and the wind and everything. But so you might see the movement of the water in a certain way, and then decide to bring that through. And
that shape. I'll nick that shape, or I'll nick the way. And then sometimes the water is so flat it looks like it's a piece of paper that's been collaged on. And then other times it's got texture because the wind's going. So sometimes you've got an area of flat against an area of texture. And it's just fascinating. I think the more you think about it like that. So so you can see these shapes here, and then in the next one you see I've taken those shapes, and then I've put them into this. So this is those 2.
Oh yes, I can see the relationship actually
between the 2 there. So this was the 2 panels that end up as the painting that Johnny Vegas bought at Manchester. And this was originally done as a commission. It was an option for a commission, and if you go on to the next painting, that was done at the same time.
Right.
So these 2 were done, and the people it was commissioned for chose this one. So I was left with the first
the other one.
Which was the one at Manchester. So when the people commissioned me, I knew that they wanted more of these colours. So I did this one basically for them, really. But the first one, the one I did previously, was just one that just sort of came out at the time. And it was quite raw and unfinished and messy, I think, for me. So it's quite a, they have these pivotal paintings, they say. So although they didn't choose it, for me it was like, oh yeah, I can. And literally that is probably an hour's work. So it came out in that time, and not a lot. I mean, it did change, but it didn't change an awful lot. I mean, I worked a couple more layers over it, but still a lot of that was,
but the kind of the fundamental elements were there at this point. Yes, I know what you mean about that. Actually, it's interesting, isn't it, that sometimes we can have those sort of experiences where the bones of the painting stay very much the same.
And I think we often as artists think, oh well, I've got to cover it up because I've not done enough time on it yet. And I think that was quite a learning process. And there's another one further along, you'll see, which I took. So if you carry on over here a bit, keep going. Next one, that one.
Okay, yeah.
So that is that's my underpainting. So I always start with these very graphic with a colour like a grey I've mixed up, and that's my underpainting, and that gives me my composition structure immediately. So that's how I like to work. And then so that sky was just put in very, very quickly, and I really liked it. So it stayed. I didn't really do very much else. The final thing was putting that sort of purpley, sort of washy brush mark over the top. And very, very, again, came together very quickly. And yet it's one of my favourite paintings that I did last year. So so I think we talk about these paintings that you sort of take with you, and it's one that I've sort of printed it out because it's old, but I've printed it out and put it up on the wall. It's like, don't forget what you learned from that painting. So I think it's interesting. So I'm after trying to retain the initial excitement of the gestural marks that you put in.
Yes, I've been very interested in that too, actually. I think there's something, isn't there, about those first moments when we begin to engage with the with the whatever it is that we're wanting to explore, and wanting to retain those. And the challenge that there is actually,
energy, isn't there? It's that energy, that creative energy, and all the intention that has got you to that point where you want to paint is put into those first marks. And then sometimes the tendency is to think, well, I should work longer, or I need to tidy it up because it's a bit scruffy, which I tend to do. I think
me too.
I remember Emily Ball told me that I think it's as a graphic designer, she said I neaten things up too much. And she said actually that stops the viewer from engaging a little bit, because it's almost like you finish the painting off for them. So I always try.
That's a great quote, isn't it? Don't finish the painting. I'm just going to write that down.
Yes. Well, you always need the viewer to come and go, oh, what's that? And I was thinking that I went around. There's an artist called Hughie O'Donoghue. Have you come across him?
No, I've not. Hughie O'Donoghue.
Oh, he's really good. He paints these huge, big oil paintings, and they're wonderful. And they had an exhibition of his work up in Kendal at the Abbott Hall Gallery. And there's a painting that they actually bought, so it's been purchased, and you can go and see it at the gallery when it's open. And I love it, and it's got this sort of gorgeous greens in, which I love. And I stood there looking at it. I thought, I love this painting, but if it was mine, I would not have left that bit, and I would have sorted out that bit there. And it's like, oh yeah, and that's how I'm trying to learn not to sort things out, is to actually leave evidence of the messy parts as well as the sort of
it's almost like you're leaving evidence of the process of the work, aren't you? Letting the viewers see
definitely
your kind of process of creation.
And like the image before that is my other favorite one.
Where am I? Okay, so we're looking at this. This is lovely, actually. Just looking at this, really enjoying looking at this one.
This one, so again, I've got a printout of this one as well, and this is also on my wall as like, learn from this one too. So this one is a bit more finished, I'd say. There's more work gone into it than the previous one. But there are elements of this which I really like, and it's to do with the way that the paint's been put over as like these sort of fluid glazes, because what I'm trying to do with my acrylics is make them like my watercolors. I want them to be as seductive and interesting as my watercolors.
That fluidity.
Yeah, so I'm trying to make them do interesting things.
Yeah, it's interesting that you and I both sort of engaged in that, actually. I mean, I think I am doing it differently, I think, to you. So I think one of the things that I'm using alongside wanting to use the acrylics in that very fluid way is to use water-based media as well. So like water-soluble graphite and water-soluble wax pastel, and then mixing those in with the glaze, you know, when I'm kind of, what I'll do is apply them and then spray them with water and allow them to merge and bleed and move around.
Yeah,
you know, and I'm finding that process really interesting.
Yeah, because it gives you something unexpected, doesn't it? And then it's
Yeah.
something, I think it's something to react against.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I remember once watching this, it was I think Sean had bought a video, what's he called? Peter Brown he's called, and he does urban en plein air paintings.
Okay.
You know, Sean likes that sort of thing, but I was watching it, and this guy's very, very good at what he does, and he's painting away, and then he says, oh, I'm getting too comfortable, it's becoming too predictable, so I'm going to go and chuck in some hooker's green or something, which I hate, he says, and then I have to react against it. So it's a bit like that, isn't it? It's like if things are getting too comfortable and you're getting a bit, you know, like lazy, it's like you've got to chuck something in there which makes you wake up again. So so that's what I quite like with the playing around with what's going on, and like, so I've been using quite a lot of different mediums to make the pigment react differently, and a lot of less water, so there's very little water goes in now.
So things like what, gloss medium, matte medium.
And lots of glazing mediums. And so basically this one has had probably very little to do with brushes as well. So I'm doing a lot more scraping the paint across. And I've been looking at the artist Gerald Richter. Is it Gerard Richter? That's it, not Gerald. Gerard Richter. And because he had that thing set up in his studio where he would have a big scraper that scraped, so it came up and, you know, went across huge canvases.
I've seen that.
Scraped his paint. So I've not looked properly, but I've just got a book on his landscapes, because he did quite a lot of photography work as well, which I'm not interested in, but I do like this process that he did. And I saw them at the Tate Modern once, and they were huge, big, amazing things. So, and I like the fact that it gives you these lost and found bits as you drag it across. It sort of sometimes takes more away and sometimes doesn't. So you get these sort of interesting. So where they the sort of purple section comes in from the right there.
Yes, down here.
That's picked up on all the different you know, the linear stuff, and you get those sort of lines that come and go. So you get solid bits and translucent bits. So it's just building all that up with little glimpses through to what you've done. So so you can see it's just fascinating. And then obviously shifting the colors. So I also say I'm a colorist, really. I love my color.
Yes, because you've certainly been working with some fluorescence as well in parts, haven't you? Which I found really interesting. It got me thinking, actually. That's an area that I haven't gone to and explored yet. And you know, maybe I could.
I bought myself the early stuff. So this was the golden fluid acrylics, and they come these. Is
that sort of olive green, golden?
I
love that color.
The fluoro pink, and they do the chartreuse, which is the bright acid yellow.
Okay.
And I actually bought it was a print, it was a monoprint, and it was in Ulverston at the Print Fest, and it was from Kelly Stewart. And it's a picture. She came up and she was artist in residence for the print festival, so she went locally and she did some of the bay from the other side, so the opposite side to me, and it was very much, you know, bay colors, sandy colors, but there was this flash of fluorescent pink, and I bought it, and it's above my bed, and that's what made me think, I'm actually, you know, I wouldn't have bought it if it hadn't had that bit of fluorescent pink in. So I started bringing fluorescence into my work. I just like the fact that it gives it that extra, and it gives you the edge again to make it, oh, what's she doing there?
What's that?
And they tend to come in at the end, and they tend to be, I've just got a pot of fluorescent paint and I chuck it and see what happens. So there's that sort of serendipity thing again of is it going to work or not, you know?
But there's also the intention, though, isn't there, the artist, because, you know, it's your decision at that moment whether to leave it or do something else with it, you know. So in leaving it, there's the artist intention in it. So even though, you know, there is some serendipity, isn't there, I guess, in the way in which it perhaps,
Yeah. I mean, what I've tended to do recently is like put a layer of gloss medium over the whole thing before I do this.
Yeah.
So that it makes it very simple to wipe it off if it doesn't go right. So so although it's like, yes, chuck it at it, I'll take some away. If it doesn't work, I'll take it away and do it again. So there is that. It's not like totally like open to
exactly.
failure. I've still got some element of control, but it's a bit of a less of a control, I suppose. Yeah, so that was that was when I was doing CVP, and that was after I'd come back from Iona. So every year, probably I think it's 5 times now I've been, every year or every year, depending on what's going on. I have a week spent painting on Iona.
That's a bit further. So you sent me some images of that, haven't you? I think these are towards the end, are they? Are they? No.
No, there's one where I'm painting. Go back a bit. Keep going back. There we go. Keep going back a little bit more. There's one when I'm there. Go back, no, the other way now. Sorry. You can see, the one where we talked about that painting before that I liked. It's keep going that way. Yeah, it's 2 to the left.
2
there. That's me. So that's my favorite place to go and paint. So it's on the north beach of Iona, which is the lower Hebrides, inner Hebrides, and it's just off the bottom of Mull.
Okay, for people who are outside of the UK, that's in Scotland. In Scotland. On the west coast. It's a beautiful little island. That area is quite spiritual.
It's a spiritual island as well,
because it is actually, isn't it?
St. Columba was there, so it's got a lot of people do pilgrimages there, and it's got an abbey and a huge history with nuns and monks and a lot of Celtic artifacts there. And there is definitely, they say it is an area in the world where the atmosphere is the thinnest, the veil is the thinnest between here and the next world. So there is this, and it does feel special, which is why I get drawn. I mean, I'm not religious, but I do yoga. I understand energy, and it is definitely a different energy on the island. And it's the colours, because the colours are amazing. So it really is like a tropical island, but you're in this country. So it's quite strange, but you have got these pink white sands, which comes from the granite. And then you've got these black rocks, which give you this lovely contrast to work with. And then you've got the turquoise sea with the purple shadows. So those are all like mine. So you can see the colours are in those studies. So I go with my watercolour set, and I sit on that beach often and just daub the colours and just take it all in, and then do paintings. So if you go right back to the beginning, those first few paintings, you can see there that was post Iona. So you can see I've got all my studies out there from sketchbooks.
From when you spent time on the beach and stuff like that.
And then they give me the bare bones of my compositions, which I then work into. And I thought these 2 were done at the same time, and were done with various levels of abstraction. So the top one is actually quite realistic for me.
It's certainly one of the more realistic paintings that I've seen, having seen some of your work, and definitely.
And yet but it was one that actually moved me more than anything else. So it's quite strange when I stood back from it, and it actually made me sort of cry. It's like, oh my God, I don't know where that came from. But at the same time, because I was doing CVP, I was pushing my abstraction. So the one below came from that. So that was literally me experimenting with pouring mediums and paint onto a flat canvas and just letting it do its thing and spraying water on it. And then, so I think that was 2 passes of that. And then I just scraped that. It almost looks a bit like a guitar. scraped that across. So it took again, as far as man hours, very, very little man hours, but you can see how it came from the process of refining and refining and sort of channeling the light and the colours and the shapes. And then if you go onto you'll see that Alice Sheridan bought that one. So she came to...
it's nice by that one.
So she came to Bath Art Fair, and she's only intended to have a small one, and she said, no, I have that one. So, and she's actually mentioned this painting, so it's in her bedroom. So she wakes up every morning and sees this painting, and she said it encapsulated all the things she wanted to get into her art, that less is more. so that you achieve the same, but through a lot less layers, I suppose.
I'm just going to stop sharing for a minute, actually, Janette, if that's okay. I want to pick up on what you just said about that less is more thing, because I think this is a really interesting topic. We've got another, we've got another 5 minutes or so, perhaps, before we need to go. But maybe if we just spend, maybe if it's all right with you, just to talk a little bit about this, because I think it's a really interesting one, because in a way, a lot of what you've been talking about with your work and showing us, kind of the progression that you've been on and how you've been, how you have been working has been around that kind of process, isn't it? And I'm noticing something very similar, and kind of where I'm at with my own work as well. It's like wanting to find this kind of sweet spot, really, of enough. I'm kind of calling it this sort of moment when, I feel like I've said enough. There's enough in it, for the painting to kind of speak, to be alive for me, and to not get into that, engage in that process of tidying it up and making it pretty, and I just think it's a really interesting kind of place, actually, to find in the work.
I think it's almost like I'd say the word is distillation. So if you imagine that if you go to a fine restaurant, everything that you get less, don't you? But you get what you get tastes amazing. So that's what we try to do as an artist, isn't it? We want to have taken all our experience and all that time we spent looking and feeling and mixing colours, and we want to be able to produce the sweet spot, don't we? It's like, how do you make that sauce so amazing that you don't need very much of it? And that's how. So it's reducing it down to its sort of its essence, really.
Honing in on I guess, just saying that, I'm thinking it's, for me anyway, it feels like it's honing in on the, what are the elements that I think are really important in this piece, and how do I make it about those and nothing else, really? And stripping away all of the other noise, in a way.
It's almost like you come back to what in the subject attracted you in the first place. So why am I here?
Well, except when you're not working from a subject, which I'm not, I'm working from internal imagery, I guess. So I haven't got that.
It's harder. I think I haven't
got that to go back to. In a way, I guess what I'm looking for is what were the things that I really wanted to say in this painting. And sometimes that's actually quite difficult, because it doesn't become clear as to what that is until you're kind of in the moment of doing it, really.
I suppose you've got to be aware of what the painting's saying to you, haven't you? Like, the painting has to speak and say, actually,
this is what I'm about. You've got to get really tuning into. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and it was Frank Arnold who was talking about surface mind and deeper mind. And I think that would be a way of expressing it, is you have to almost really connect into that deeper mind and keep away from the surface stuff. And I think when you're connecting with that deeper mind, that's when you can hear what the painting wants to say most.
And I think that
makes any sense
at all. I think most people who probably work from their sketches, and I think, again, I've been in quite a lot of Emily Ball courses, and she's been really good for me. So if anyone knows Emily Ball, she's got art schools down in Sussex.
I've just made a note of her name, actually. I should go and investigate.
Yeah, she's very good, and does online things too. But we'd go on summer school, so you go and spend 2 or 3 days on location, creating packs and packs of studies, like big piles of them. But then you'd come back and you wouldn't even look at them, because you would work then from what's inside, because you spent so long putting all that information in. It comes out, whether you don't
need to look at it anymore. It's already kind of
just the process. All those marks and everything that was interesting and important to you is in your head now, in your psyche. And if you let it, if you enable it, it will come out and spill out onto the canvas. So they do a lot of like meditation stuff. So you sit with your eyes closed and you meditate on what was important to you, and then you work blindly. You keep your eyes closed with charcoal and you just compose what's in your head, and then you work from those. So that's really interesting. So it's I think what we have to do, if you're working, for people who do want to take a sketch and then develop it, is almost like try and sort of decipher what about that sketch is interesting, but move away from it. Leave it to one side and think, okay, I might refer back to it if I need it, but basically the painting is its own thing.
Yeah.
And I'm just going,
and they do, don't they? They sort of take on their own life at some point, really.
Yeah, and I think you have to let it do that. And I think if you're over controlling, then you tend to kill its spirit, don't you? And there's nothing wrong, nothing worse than a boring painting.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I'm kind of mindful of time, and I know you've got things that you need to do. So thank you very much for today, Janette. I hope people who are listening find this interesting. I find it fascinating. So I will pause. I'll stop the recording, and yeah, thank you once again.
All right. Well, yeah, pleasure.
Cheers.
So if you need me back.
Okay. Cheers. Thanks very much.